So this weekend, I want to focus on three themes. One is hummus with two M's. The second is head tables. And the third is dignitaries. So first, hummus with two M's. So hummus with two M's is that stuff you use with pita bread, and it tastes great. And the recipe's pretty simple. You grind down chickpeas, you add some olive oil, maybe some lemon juice, and that's about it. Although there are 1,000 different ways to make it. And if you talk to people from the Mediterranean area, everybody has their own secret recipe. And the beautiful thing about hummus is that it is so simple, but the number one requirement in order to make hummus is that something has to be ground down. And that's why there's another word, hummus, with just one M, that is the Latin root for the word humility. Because there is no humility without humiliation. And it's a hard thing. I remember when I was ordained, we had a great party afterwards, and all these people got up and said really nice things about me. And then my crazy Aunt Mary got the microphone. And everybody probably has a crazy Aunt Mary in their family, but my crazy Aunt Mary got up and she said, you know, now that you're a priest, everybody calls you father, and everybody thinks you're so great. But we're your family, and we know you are full of bull. And she did not use the word bull. All of us need a crazy Aunt Mary at various times in our life. And the reason why we need a crazy Aunt Mary is because the world tempts us into thinking that our value comes from the outside. It tempts us into thinking that our value comes from being better than someone else. You know, I might not be the fastest runner, but at least I'm not in last place. Or I might not be the smartest student, but at least I'm in the top 10%. And we think that those measures somehow or another give us dignity, or somehow or another give us value. And that's why the first reading is so important, because humility is not thinking poorly of ourselves. Humility is thinking of others with ourselves. It's being part of the earth. That word hummus with one M really means to be of the earth, to be grounded, to be connected. Because our dignity comes from one place alone. It comes from the book of Genesis. In the beginning, he created them. Male and female, he created them. In the divine image and likeness, he created them. That's where our dignity comes from, and no other place. Now, there's all kinds of honors and awards we can get in our lifetime, but it doesn't change our fundamental dignity that's embedded in our bones and flesh. That's what our value comes from. Now, I know the world values people differently, and that's why, you know, when there are celebrations, we often have head tables, right? And when someone's having a special celebration, we put them at the head table. If it's a wedding, we put the bridal party at the head table. If it's an awards banquet, we put the award recipients at the head table. And that's appropriate. That makes complete sense. The problem is when we think being at the head table changes our value. When we think striving for that position is somehow or another going to make us better, then we fall into the trap. Now, being at the head table is what Jesus points out in the gospel today, but it's really a symbol for the four basic temptations of our lives. You know, we seek our value in different places. Sometimes we seek it in fame or being well thought of. Sometimes we seek it in money. Sometimes we seek it in power. Sometimes we seek it in pleasure. But in all four of those areas, they are false temptations. Now, in and of themselves, those four things are not bad. There's absolutely nothing wrong with them. What is problematic is when we elevate them and think that somehow or another achieving one or all of those measures is going to change us, is going to make us better. The only thing that will fundamentally make us better is God himself. That's what helps us to be better. That's what helps us to be holy. Now, in power circles or in leadership circles, there's often talk about who's at the table. And what that means is who's making the decisions, right? And all of us want to be at the table. We want to know that our voice matters, that we have a role to play in helping to make decisions. And one of the phrases that's used sometimes is, if you're not at the table, you're probably on the menu. There's a lot of truth in that. If you're not at the table, you're probably on the menu, meaning you're probably either being talked about or other people are making decisions about your life. And none of us like to be in that powerless feeling. None of us like to feel like our lives are at the discretion of others. And that's why Jesus gives us a different model. You know, when we think about dignitaries, we think a dignitary walks into the room and everyone stands up. Well, that's what we do when we read the gospel. We're all seated for the first and second reading, but when we read the gospel, we stand up because a dignitary has walked into the room. And that dignitary is the one who is both the table and the meal. And I want you to think about that. Jesus Christ sets the table for us. That's why we bow towards the altar in church, because the altar is a symbol of Christ himself inviting us to the banquet. Not only is he the table, but he's also the meal. He invites us to come and feed on his very substance so that we can grow more and more into the likeness of Christ. And by being fed on the body and blood of Christ, we indeed are nourished. We are brought to a greater reality of that body of Christ in the world. And by being the body of Christ, we recognize that our lives are not about status. They're not about honor. They're not about money. They're not about power. They're not about pleasure. Our lives are about service. And our relationships are not transactional. I don't invite you to dinner because you're going to invite me back. I invite you to dinner because I have something to share with you. As Christians, we're called to be in the world as Christ is to us. We're called to be those who come to serve, not to be served. And what we receive here in this Eucharist is preparing us. It's feeding us so that we can go back out into the world and share what we have received.